Welcome to these two stories that are to act as a warning for those foolish enough to wander deep into a forest at night. This first story is called The Whispering Woods. The small town of Eldridge was surrounded by dense, ancient woods, known as the Whispering Woods. For generations, townsfolk whispered stories of strange happenings and eerie sounds emanating from the forest, warning children to never venture too deep. But curiosity got the better of the young, and on a dare, it got the better of 17-year-old Lisa. Lisa, confident and unafraid, accepted the challenge from her friends. It was a crisp autumn evening when she set out, the setting sun casting long, foreboding shadows through the trees. Her friends waited at the edge of the woods, promising to wait until she returned. They didn't know what they were getting her into. With a flashlight in hand and a smirk on her face, Lisa began her trek into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to brush her skin. The further she went, the quieter it became, the sounds of the town fading away until there was only the crunch of leaves beneath her feet. As she walked, Lisa started to hear faint whispers, so soft she thought she was imagining them. She paused, turning off her flashlight to let her eyes adjust to the darkness, straining to hear the words. Lisa. She spun around, heart pounding. Someone had called her name. The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. She called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then the whispering resumed. A chorus of voices, blending into one another, growing louder and more insistent. Lisa, come deeper. Come find us. Fear prickled at her skin, but she shook it off and pressed on. She wasn't about to chicken out now. The whispers grew louder and more coherent. She could almost make out individual words, promises of secrets and truths hidden deep within the forest. Suddenly, the path before her split into two. The left path was dark and twisted. The right path slightly more open and inviting. The whispers urged her to the left, but Lisa hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back. But she forced herself forward, choosing the left path. The air grew colder, and the darkness thickened. Lisa's flashlight flickered, then died, plunging her into blackness. Panic welled up inside of her, but she forced herself to stay calm, moving forward slowly, hands outstretched to feel her way. She stumbled upon a clearing, illuminated by a pale, ghostly light. In the center stood a stone well, ancient and covered in moss. The whispers were deafening now, all coming from the well, echoing up from its depths. Lisa, come closer. Look inside. Her legs moved of their own accord, carrying her to the edge of the well. She peered into the darkness, the whispers rising to a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices overlapping, screaming for her attention. Suddenly, she saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring up at her from the depths, filled with malevolent intelligence. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a chilling silence. Lisa. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was deep, guttural, and filled with malice. You've come to join us. A cold, clammy hand shot out from the well, grabbing her wrist with vice-like grip. She screamed, trying to pull away, but the hand held fast, dragging her towards the edge. She dug her heels into the ground, but it was no use. As she was pulled into the well, the last thing she saw was the grinning faces of her friends, standing at the edge of the clearing, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light as the one in the well. They watched, silent and still, as Lisa disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, the townsfolk found her friends at the edge of the woods, pale and unresponsive, their eyes glazed over. Lisa was never seen again. But on quiet nights, if you stand at the edge of the whispering woods and listen closely, you can still hear the whispers calling out her name, beckoning anyone foolish enough to venture too deep. And the well waits, always hungry for more. The next story is called The Lantern Man. The dense forest of Blackwood had always been shrouded in mystery. Legends spoke of a lantern-wielding figure who roamed the woods at night, leading travellers astray until they were lost forever. The villagers called him the Lantern Man, and few dared to enter the forest after dark. 18-year-old Mark didn't believe in ghost stories. A skeptic by nature, he scoffed at the tales of the Lantern Man and decided to prove them wrong. One Friday night, armed with nothing but his flashlight and a sense of bravado, he ventured into Blackwood. The forest was eerily silent. The usual sounds of nocturnal animals strangely absent. Mark's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the gnarled branches and thick underbrush. He walked deeper into the woods, determined to find nothing but trees and shadows. About an hour into his hike, Mark saw a flickering light in the distance. It swayed gently, casting long, dancing shadows. Curiosity piqued. He made his way toward the light, assuming it was some campers, or perhaps even a lost traveler. As he approached, the light seemed to move away, always staying just out of reach. Frustrated, but undeterred, Mark quickened his pace. He called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" but received no reply. The only answer was the rhythmic flicker of the light, leading him deeper into the heart of Blackwood. Finally, he reached a small clearing. In the centre stood a figure holding an old rusted lantern. The figure was tall and thin, draped in a tattered cloak that fluttered in the breeze. Its face was obscured by shadows, but the eyes glowed a sickly yellow, were unmistakably fixated on Mark. "Are you the Lantern Man?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised the lantern higher, casting a wider circle of light. Mark noticed the ground was littered with old, weathered bones and decaying remnants of clothing. His heart raced as he realized these were the remains of those who had come before him, lured by the same flickering light. Panic surged through him. He turned to run, but trees seemed to close in around him, branches twisting and turning, blocking his path. The Lantern Man stepped closer, and with each step, the light grew brighter, and the whispers began. Voices of the lost echoed through the clearing, begging for help, crying out in despair. Mark clamped his hands over his ears, trying to drown out the maddening sound. He stumbled, tripped over roots and rocks. The lantern light casting grotesque shadows that seemed to reach for him. In a desperate bid for escape, Mark scrambled to his feet and ran blindly through the forest. The whispers followed him, growing louder and more insistent. The lantern man's light flickered in and out of view, always behind him, always closing in. Mark's flashlight flickered, then died, plunging him into darkness. He fought against the urge to scream, knowing it would only attract the lantern man. He slowed his pace, trying to move quietly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, in the distance, he saw it, the faint glow of a lantern. But this time, it wasn't a sickly yellow light from the lantern man. It was a warm, inviting light. Mark stumbled towards it, hope flaring in his chest. As he broke through the trees, he found himself at the edge of the forest. The light came from a small group of villagers, lanterns in hand, searching for him. Relief washed over him as he collapsed to the ground, exhaustion taking hold. The villagers rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. They listened as he recounted his encounter with the lantern man, their faces grim. They had heard the whispers too, had seen the flickering lights. But they had been lucky. They had found him in time. Mark left Blackwood that night, vowing to never return. But the legend of the lantern man lived on, and those who dared to venture into the forest after dark knew that if they saw a flickering light, they should turn back. For the lantern man was always waiting, ready to lead the unwary to their doom. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit like and subscribe.